Guys, it's another video. So today I'm gonna do my worst fail, but I want to shout out. Hold on. It's not working. I want to shout out the one and only Creepy McPasta for sponsoring this video. I am very scared because who knows what's gonna happen. This is gonna be so scary. So scary. Okay,
Madness, well, step right up for
this is the thing.
You cannot win the championship.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Creeppasta presents Peeping Tommy, written by Sammy Scott.
Ah, yeah, hold on. I'm gonna get a blanket. And probably get this. I don't know why. Makes me feel comfortable. Look at what's on. The internet. Yay. Okay. Oh my god. Hold on, I'm gonna get my blanket. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Hold on, I have to do my nails. Okay. By the way, this is called Peeping Tommy. I thought
It started innocently enough, honest. I was walking home from school, which is only about 5 blocks away from home. Most days I enjoy the walk, particularly in the fall and spring when the air is comfortable. Add in a calm breeze, and the walk is something I actually look forward to. Rainy days suck, and winter days can be brutal, but it's not a long walk. And Mom's work schedule doesn't allow her the time to pick me up, so what choice do I have? Especially since Dad's no longer in the picture. Most of the time I spend the walk looking down at my feet. I'm shy. I don't like making eye contact with people. It irritates me in a way I can't explain. Needless to say, I don't have many friends. I'm okay with that. I look at other kids and their stupid little groupings, usually laughing about something dumb, sometimes casting a collective glance in my direction, and I don't see the appeal at all. No thank you. I'm fine not being included. Besides, the sidewalk on my route home is cracked and uneven. I have to look at my feet, or I could easily trip. There's this one huge tree in particular, where the roots have grown under the sidewalk and kicked up the slabs in places. It's a stubbed toe or a broken nose just waiting to happen. So there was this one day that I was walking home and realized that I was about 6 yards behind Jenny Aldrich. I recognized her by her long blonde hair that fell in wavy locks down to the middle of her back. She sits in front of me in homeroom, so I probably know the back of her head better than she does. I'd never seen her on my walk before. She was one of the popular girls, always accompanied by 2 or 3 other pretty girls, while being stared at by a cluster of pathetic 12-year-old boys in our class who were stupid enough to think Jenny would ever give them the time of day. moments after I'd recognized her. Jenny made an abrupt turn through a gate to her left, continuing on down a sidewalk that led to one of the nicer houses on the block. I reached the gate in time to see her open the front door and enter. The house was beige with gray shingles and shutters, a wide front porch with a quartet of plants and hanging baskets, and an ornate oak front door. The yard was dotted by a handful of trees and framed by a pristine white fence. So this is where Jenny lives, I thought, when she's not at school hypnotizing my fellow classmates. The idea that she existed outside the 7 hours of school struck me as odd. Of course she did, but at the same time, I never considered it. Without making the conscious decision to do so, I turned and began walking down the sidewalk toward her house, placing my feet carefully enough that my footsteps were silent even to my own ears. I studied the house's windows as I approached to make sure no one was looking out at me. When I reached the porch, I set my backpack on the ground in front of some hedges and tiptoed up the steps. I ducked over to a window on my right, crouching, and peeked inside. There was no one in the living room. Floor-to-ceiling shelves burdened with books and an assortment of framed photos covered most of the walls. A huge black leather sofa faced a massive flat-screen TV that was off. A glass coffee table held a stack of large picture books and a bowl of carved wooden fruit. There was a painting on the wall of a man in safari clothes, binoculars held up to his eyes. Still crouched down, I passed by the front door and peered in another window to the left. I was greeted by the sight of a large wooden dining room table, surrounded by matching chairs that had black leather seats. A buffet held a vase of flowers and several ornate candles, over which loomed white-framed photos of the family. By studying the pictures, I learned that Jenny had two sisters, one younger, one older, also blonde. There was movement beyond the dining room door, and I ducked slightly, my heart skipping. I could see the kitchen, and Jenny's mom, I recognized her from the family photos, was standing at a counter. She appeared to be sorting mail into two piles. Keep, junk, junk, keep, I imagined she was thinking. Jenny entered from the right, and the two of them talked, although I couldn't hear their voices. They both smiled at times, and from their body language it appeared that they had a good relationship. Jenny then turned and left the room, a more childlike bounce in her step than the way she typically catwalked the hallways at school. By craning my neck and pressing my cheek into the glass, I was able to watch her as she began ascending a set of stairs. And then, she was gone. What am I doing? I thought with some urgency. Someone else could come home, or a neighbor could see me. I felt the sudden need to pee. Racing from the porch as quickly and quietly as I could, I snatched up my backpack without pausing and ran the rest of the way home. Alone in my own dark kitchen, I poured a glass of milk and ate a stack of Oreos without even tasting them. What I had just done was stupid, but strangely thrilling. And it wasn't at all about Jenny Aldrich specifically or even her house. It was about seeing people. Really seeing people for who they are, absent the fake airs we all put on in public. You are who you are when you are alone, my mom had once told me. And suddenly I wanted to know more, because looking into the windows of Jenny Aldrich's home was exciting to me, but not in a pervy way. This isn't that kind of story. I passed her in the hallway at school the next day. She was bookended by two girls almost as attractive as her, the three of them deep in a conversation that, from the looks on their faces, likely centered on the degradation of some lesser classmate. She looked over at me as I passed her by, our eyes locking for the briefest of moments, and she pretended she didn't see me. The next moment, I was on my butt on the cold linoleum floor, my books sliding away like hockey pucks. I had collided with Arnold Butch Gray, who was 2 years older but in the same grade as me, a 14-year-old with the body of a man but without the brains to match. He had responded to my distracted collision by shoving me away, and I heard scattered laughter as my tailbone made hard contact with the floor. "Watch where you're going, Mouse," he said. On top of his massive frame, Butch sported a melon-shaped head, a sneer-like smile that surrounded a mouthful of braces, and the most unfortunate orange buzz cut. His skin would have been sickly pale if it wasn't mostly covered with a mass of freckles the color of dog poop. "Sorry, Butch," I muttered, sliding my books towards me. You know how in every class there's this one kid who's a bit smaller and less developed than all the others? A kid who's mostly quiet and socially awkward, but frequently gets good grades? Yeah, that's me. And that's why Butch called me Mouse. But I don't care. There are worse animals to be compared to. "Sorry, Butch," he repeated in a mocking high-pitched tone. He glanced over his shoulder to where I had been looking when I had run into him, and he saw Jenny and her entourage. He chortled derisively. "Not a chance, Mouse. Not one chance in a million years." I had been the object of Butch's disdain for 2 years, and for reasons I could not begin to fathom. It was like my very presence had caused him great offense, and my first awareness of the existence of Butch Gray had been his immediate and relentless mockery and bullying. I avoided him as much as I could, but he seemed pulled toward me like a magnet. I stood up, books in my arms, my head down, and walked around him, my body tensing for a second shove or perhaps for Butch to reach around with one of his ridiculously long arms and smack the load out of my hands. Neither happened. Instead, I continued my walk of shame through a hallway of kids who opted for one of two choices: silent stares or laughter. I don't understand people. Walk home from school, I found myself behind Jenny Aldrich again. But this time when she made a left turn toward her house, I did not follow. I wasn't interested in Jenny, no matter what Butch said. Instead, I continued to the house next door to hers. I observed it from the end of the walk. The windows of this home stared back at me quietly, its black front door like a mouth gasping in surprise. I approached it quietly. I couldn't tell if anyone was home, but should I be spotted and asked what I was doing, I planned to ask, "Does Franklin live here?" and then shrug an apology when they said no. Impressed in my own ability to mount the front porch and slink under a window without making a sound, I peered inside. I was greeted by another dining room. The table in this room was set for four, with plates, napkins, and utensils placed with precision in front of each chair. The rest of the table was empty, save for a pair of tall salt and pepper shakers on top of a white lace runner. At first, I felt disappointment that there appeared to be no one at home, but then, in the kitchen, which, like Jenny's house, was situated just beyond the dining room, I saw a woman preparing food at the counter. From the way she subtly swayed her hips while working, and the occasional movement of her lips, it appeared she was listening to music while she busied herself over a cutting board that was covered with cucumbers and the remnants of other vegetables. She was a pretty woman, about my mom's age. Her auburn hair, dyed, was done up in a clip, and she was wearing full makeup as well as a red dress covered by a white apron devoid of stains. I was reminded of a younger, prettier version of the mom from Leave It to Beaver, one of those old black and white shows my mom likes to watch. I couldn't imagine that this woman dressed this nicely for a typical dinner at home, and I wondered if perhaps she was preparing for company. But it was a Tuesday, so that didn't really make sense to me. She smiled as she dumped a handful of cucumber slices into a large wooden bowl that was already overflowing with lettuce. She continued to sing and sway her hips as she tossed the salad using large tongs, and I wondered if she had a pretty voice. Then, cradling the bowl in both hands, she swung around and approached the dining room door. I ducked down quickly, making sure to stay as much out of her view as possible while still being able to see her. She set the bowl down in the center of the dining room table, stepped back, and studied it for a moment, and then reached forward and turned the bowl ever so slightly. She smiled with satisfaction and wiped her palms on her apron, smoothing it in the process. She was the picture of poise and grace, and I was thinking about how she looked just like an ideal mom from a television commercial, when suddenly she jammed one red-painted pinky nail up her left nostril and began to dig. I ducked down under the window and covered my mouth with both hands, stifling laughter. This action was so incongruous with her otherwise perfect demeanor that I found myself both incredibly shocked and overwhelmingly amused. Crawling on my hands and knees to the porch stairs, I jumped down, skipping all the steps, grabbed my backpack, and booked it down the sidewalk and out of the yard, laughing all the way home. What I was doing was stupid. I could get caught. I could get in trouble. But I was hooked. People were a mystery to me, and mostly I didn't like them, but observing them when they were alone was strangely appealing. Seeing them, observing them, and their own habitat was fascinating. It was like going to the zoo or the museum, only infinitely better. Tomorrow, I decided, I would check out the third house. I had an arithmetic test the next day. It was simple enough as far as I was concerned. Math has always been easy for me. Mr. Blumenthal, a skinny, balding man with a penchant for Argyle sweater vests and a stupidly massive mustache, had told us to bring our test up to his desk when we were finished. I was the first one done, so I walked quietly up the center aisle, my head down, my test paper pinched between the thumbs and index fingers of both hands. Butch sat in the front row, right in front of the teacher's desk. This meant his massive bulk was a visual obstacle for anyone unfortunate enough to sit behind him, but it was the only way for Blumenthal to keep a constant eye on him. As I passed by Butch's desk, he whispered, "Squeak, squeak, Mousie." I placed my test on Mr. Blumenthal's desk. "Done already, Tom?" he asked, sliding the paper toward him and turning it around. "Yes," I said. "That was fast," he responded with a tone of skepticism, not looking at me. "Did you double-check your work?" The question was offensive. I always aced math tests. Why would he ask a question that insinuated carelessness? I don't understand people. From behind me, there was a high-pitched but quiet squeaking sound. I felt myself blush. "Yes," I said, and turned around to go back to my desk. I should have known it was coming, but I didn't. Butch stuck out one giant foot, and before I knew it, I was flat on my face in the center aisle. The classroom erupted in laughter. 2 days, 2 public pratfalls, courtesy of Butch Gray. My face burning crimson, I got up and returned to my desk. Butch was sent to the principal's office, saying as he walked out the door that he had only been stretching, a claim that elicited even more laughter, and Mr. Blumenthal proceeded to scold the class. But he never asked me if I was okay. Whatever. People are stupid. Initially, I didn't have much success with my new hobby on the way home from school that afternoon. There was no one home in the first house I looked into. There was an old woman watering the yard of the second house, so I didn't stop there. I was halfway down the sidewalk of the third house when a man that I had somehow not seen over by the hedges called out, "Can I help you?" I jumped, startled. "Sorry," I said. "Does, Franklin live here?" He looked at me, puzzled. "No." "Sorry," I said again. "Wrong house," and made a hasty exit. The next few houses were more interesting. I was able to observe a woman on the phone, a landline no less, crying and holding a tissue up to her nose as she talked. She had cried so hard that her pale face had erupted in red blotches. Next door, a teenage couple was getting hot and heavy on a living room sofa. Gross. No thank you. Moving on. At another house, I watched a woman quietly reading a book, a pleasant smile on her face as she turned pages. At one point, she even put her hand on her chest and took in a long, satisfied breath, completely lost in another world. As soon as she put the book down, however, the smile evaporated into a default.
Okay, guys, that is the end for this video because my battery is low, so I have to go charge my phone. So. Like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Peace.